All right. All right, we'll get started. Just want to call the, well, first of all, welcome everybody. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Just want to call the meeting to order for the Oxnard Finance and Governance Committee for May 13th, 2025. Madam Clerk, may we have the roll call and posting of the agenda?
Chair MacArthur,
Here.
Committee Member Rodriguez,
Present.
Committee Member Starr.
Here.
The agenda for this meeting was posted in the kiosk at City Hall, the Oxnard Public Library, the city administrative offices, and on the city's website on Tuesday, May 6th. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can have everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. If you'll just repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll go to the first item on the agenda. This is a time for public comment for items not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments on this item?
Chair MacArthur, we do not have any public speakers for items not on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to the consent agenda. And the only item I see here is the approval of minutes for the April 22nd, 2025 Finance and Governance Committee meeting. Do any members have any questions or comments on this item?
No, I move to approve.
I'll second that. Madam Clerk, call for the vote.
Mayor, just for the record, we do not have any public speakers on the information and consent agenda.
Thank you.
Committee Member Rodriguez,
Aye.
Committee Member Starr,
Yes.
Chair MacArthur,
Yes,
and the motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
thank you. We'll move to item D1. This is from the Finance Department. This entails accounting and financial risk assessment update. The recommendation is that the Finance and Governance Committee receive the risk assessment update regarding accounting and financial reporting as part of the internal control integrated framework pursuant to City of Oxnard Finance Policy 1.05 and recommend staff forward the presentation to City Council. Any members have any questions of staff on this item? Go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you. I like the report, by the way. I do have a question on page 35 of our PDF. We're looking at the fiscal finance policies and looking at 1.03 in particular. And I see that our committee is required to review finance-related city council policies at least every 5 years. And I was wondering, when was the last time this was done, and when do we anticipate doing that again?
Oh, so these were, you'll see the dates in the
back in
right-hand corner.
2020.
Yes, back in 2020. So they should be up for review again. But the whole series of these policies, like the last one was implemented, I believe, in December of 2021. So if you take them one at a time, you can do them starting this September and go in order if we'd like to do that.
That'd be fine. I just, it sounds like we haven't done one yet, not that one was due yet, but I guess soon we'll cycle through those. That'd be great. Looking forward to that. I hope that'll be on the calendar soon.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
That's all
Thank
my
you.
questions.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on this particular item?
Chair MacArthur, we do not have any public speakers for this item.
Thank you. If there are no speakers, what's the desire of the committee on this item?
Move the recommended action.
It's to take it to council.
I'll second that recommended action.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Committee Member Starr,
Yes.
Chair MacArthur,
Yes.
Committee Member Rodriguez,
Aye.
and the motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to the next item. This is D2 from Public Works. Subject entails fiscal year 2025-26 Landscape Maintenance District. Initiation of proceedings to levy assessments, approval of a consolidated engineer's report and declaration of intention to levy assessments. The recommendation from staff is that the Finance and Governance Committee recommend the City Council, acting as the legislative body of the City of Oxnard Landscape Maintenance District, otherwise known as LMDs. 1, adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Oxnard, California, initiating proceedings to levy assessments against real property for fiscal year 2025-26 in connection with the city's landscape maintenance districts. 2, adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Oxnard, California, approving a consolidated engineer's report regarding assessments against real property for fiscal year 25-26 in connection with the city's landscape maintenance districts. 3, adopt a resolution of the City Council of the City of Oxnard, California, declaring its intention to levy assessments against real property for fiscal years 25-26 in connection with the city's landscape maintenance districts, setting the public hearing for June 17, 2025. 4, approve a one-time fund balance contribution to the general fund from LMD 49 in the amount of 55,401.45 as outlined in the staff report. And number 5, approve a distribution of LMD 54 reserve fund balance in the amount of 3902.20 to the equivalent benefit fund or benefit units in LMD 54 as outlined in this staff report. And I see Director Wolf is here to answer any questions we may have of him. Do any committee members have any staff of him on this item?
No, I don't have questions.
Okay, I do have some questions. So I'm actually first starting with looking at the engineer's report, which is not connected, but referred to in the report. So on page 23 of the engineer's report that's online, there's a table 6.2, maintenance and cost estimates, and I see a project for LMD number 43. It wouldn't be in your little packet here. It's actually...
It's 68?
So there's a reference to a link that you'd have to look at online in the
Okay.
report. So I see this $133,430 project for LMD 43, and I'm wondering if that's for the lighting replacement? Yes?
Good afternoon, committee members. Michael Wolf, Director of Public Works. So yes, we have a light replacement project. It's been on the books for a little while. It's in our capital improvement program.
Okay.
It's a walkway that runs through the assessment district area, and it's a replacement of a lot of the pathway lights there.
Okay. And I also see on that same table, there's a $45,000 amount for LMD 37, and then I decided to look at the table 6.3.1, which is on page 35 of that engineer report, and I don't see that there, so I'm wondering if I'm just kind of reading this wrong. I'm just wondering if you see what I see.
You want to come up and answer that?
Good afternoon, committee. Anthony Miller, Special Districts Manager. I am reviewing 6.3.1, and I also have the city's consultant who will prepare this report online as well. And for any questions that may come up in regards to tables and building these things, her name's Amanda Welker. She might be able to help us as well. But I do.
But do you see what I'm saying? Do you see the 45,000 on table 6.2, and then on 6.3.1, there's just, it doesn't show up there.
Correct. That, I believe, should be there unless it might have been an oversight, but I'd have to confirm here with Amanda as well. Amanda, this one I thought was included in this table, but.
Yeah, I'm reviewing that myself. It looks like kind of in our backup documentation here, we do have it included as part of the cash flow. So if possible, if you could give me just a couple minutes just to kind of crunch the numbers here and make sure that that's reflecting appropriately, I'll confirm with you in just a moment here.
Okay.
37.
Is that the other question?
Yeah, I definitely have other questions as well, but
Okay,
I
you
don't
want to
want
wait for this one? Okay.
I'm happy to wait a little bit.
Unless you have another one that you want to move on to, that,
I could go on if you like.
sure.
Okay. So I guess one thing I'm trying to have a better understanding of is how do you determine that some work is funded on a pay-as-you-go basis, whereas other work is deemed a project for which the city is charging and accumulating funds for 5 years? Would those be all considered, I guess, project improvements under the technical term, or what's the thinking here?
So generally speaking, when we classify something as a pay-as-you-go project, it is something that the district can afford to include within its annual assessment. There's a balance we try to strike with some items that may be a pay-as-you-go project in one district, but not necessarily in another district. So in a district that may not be able to fully fund the entirety of a project within one fiscal year, or perhaps even within 2 fiscal years, but can in 3, 4, or 5, we may include payments or installment payments into a fund to perform those tasks. In other districts, it may be impractical to both save for a project and also fund regular maintenance. And so I'll use as an example LND 25. That district has a relatively large number of trees for its size. In order for us to fully to keep this on a regular schedule in terms of pruning those trees, without extending that schedule out to 4 or 5 years, which wouldn't necessarily be a recommended length of time between tree prunes. We try and keep that around 3-ish years, kind of keep on track with the rest of the city's trees. We are actually, for example, including in their budget about a third of their trees every year as a part of their operating expenses. So in other districts, that may qualify as a project expense that they do, that they save money for because they can afford the payment and their maintenance expenses. But there are situations in which we may be breaking the project up into smaller chunks and doing them as we go. So it really does depend district by district. And then another option for us to consider a project would be something that doesn't necessarily happen on an annual basis. It may be something that not only is inconvenient to assess for within a single fiscal year, but it's something that may happen on a less frequent basis than every 5 years, maybe every 10 years. Could be a capital project, something along those lines. So there is not a specific hard and fast guideline, except for the fact that we don't save money for specific regular maintenance tasks as a part of the installment payments.
Yeah, it just kind of seems to me that I understand.
Yeah.
I understand for an improvement why you would have an accumulation. I'm a little bit struggling with when it's maintenance.
So I'll read it from the Streets and Highway Code section so that you can have it here. It says, the legislative body may by resolution determine that the estimated cost of any of the proposed improvements described in subdivisions A to D, inclusive of sections 22525, is greater than can be conveniently raised from a single annual assessment and ordered that the estimated cost be raised by an assessment levied and collected in installments over a period not to exceed 5 years. So it's conveniently raised. If it can't be conveniently raised in a single annual assessment, it can be done over a period not to exceed 5 years.
Which code section is it?
22660.
All right, so it'd be your position that whether it's a project or maintenance is not really a relevant question as to whether you have, or rather, let me restate that. Whether it's an improvement or maintenance, is that relevant to whether something is a project for which you accumulate funds over a 5-year period?
The relevance is to make sure it is consistent with the Streets and Highway Code section.
Okay, so I guess that doesn't really quite answer my question yet. What I'm struggling with is that there's amounts for maintenance which we're allowed to accumulate for like 47% of the next year or something like that in reserve. And the code seems to define what maintenance is. And when I'm looking at code section 22531, it defines maintenance, and it includes repair, removal, replacement of all or any part of any improvement. And then in subdivision B there, it talks about providing for the life, growth, health, and beauty of maintenance, of landscaping, including cultivation, irrigation, trimming, spraying, fertilizing, or treating for disease or injury. So I look at these projects to trim trees or to repair sidewalks or fencing, and I think of this as a maintenance cost. And I really struggle with the idea that we're treating this as something that we accumulate as if it was an improvement. So I'm just kind of wondering how you kind of square that.
So we have our legal counsel online as well. I don't know if Mark Mandel wants to provide his legal opinion on that. But again, the code section says estimated cost of any of those proposed improvements described in subdivisions A to D, inclusive of section 22525.
Right, but improvement's also defined in the code. And that's where, that seems, that's why I'm struggling here, because there is definitely a distinction in the code between improvements and maintenance. And I'm not expecting necessarily an answer right this moment, but I think it's worth looking further into. And I don't know if our person online has an answer to the question we had earlier.
Maybe before legal gives feedback, I'm curious because I appreciate the lens that you're coming from, because that's not really something I was considering when reading the material and receiving the information. But does it become a project when there's been so much neglect and the lack of the ability to maintain over time? Is it the severity of the situation, or is it just the opportunity for us to maintain our, basically our streets and our trees and everything in between? Just because I know historically we haven't had the ability to maintain versus now it becomes a project.
Yeah, I'll let maybe Mark can answer some of this information.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I was trying to research a more specific question while you were asking it, but unfortunately, it's going to take a little more looking back at that. But really, what the distinction here is that sometimes there's work that needs to be smoothed over several years. So rather than having a spiky rate where you collect the entire cost of the anticipated work in 1 year, this allows you to spread that cost over several years. So that's the purpose here. It's not so much, is this something that's been deferred, as is this something that that is a multi-year cost, something which you don't want to have to raise the rate to fully cover it in 1 year. As to your specific question about the distinction between maintenance and improvements, I'll have to do some additional research on that.
Okay, that'd be great, because at least when I'm reading it, and maybe I'm reading it incorrectly, it just seems like for an improvement, yeah, you can accumulate funds, but for maintenance, I'm not so certain about that, especially when it goes as far as defining it as repair, removal, replacement of all or any part of any improvement. And then, of course, the other things like tree trimming and stuff like that are clearly covered by maintenance. So I'm kind of struggling, because if we're allowed to simply say that maintenance efforts can be paid for well in advance or accumulated in advance, what we're really doing is accumulating money from the people being assessed for a benefit that they won't get in the next year. It's going to be something years down the road. And the way they wrote the code up, they wrote the code in such a way that you would only have a reserve typically for at least maintenance items of about 47% of the year, because that's the length of time it would take for the next payment when there's two payments of property taxes. And by not accumulating, you're ensuring that the people that are the current households are getting the benefit of the money they pay. Otherwise, you run the risk that somebody's putting money up for something far in the future, and it'll be the next owner of the house that actually gets the benefit, not the person that's paying currently. So that's what I'm kind of looking at and struggling with. I do not expect an answer today, but that's what I'm having trouble with here.
Well, I would like to.
Go ahead.
I would like to point out that these assessments are against property, not against the owner.
I know.
So the notion is that if in year one I collect money towards a project, it'll actually be completed in year three. The owner in year one is paying on behalf of the property for 1 year, and that money stays with, essentially is in an account that's being held for the property by the city. So I don't think the fact that the ownership may change makes a huge difference in a legal sense here. But I understand your point.
Right. I think one thing I'd like to see is I'd like to see maybe maybe Anthony, you can do this for me later offline. I'd like to see how the fund balances change over a 5-year period of time. If you've got a project, typically what we're seeing here is we have money for maintenance. We clearly don't have enough money for an improvement. And when we try to accumulate towards the improvement, there's clearly not enough money for maintenance for what's actually there for maintenance when you include it with the improvement. When you have the caps, there's not a way you can collect enough money with the cap to successfully fund the improvement and pay for the maintenance in some cases.
Cap on the reserve or cap on the max assessment?
Cap on the max assessment. So I'd like it if someone can sit down with me and kind of show me, here's how the beginning balance of zero, collections, here's the reserve, the amount we're accumulating for an improvement. These 5 years, eventually the money is deployed from this improvement fund to pay for that improvement. And I guess in theory, maybe we might be either at zero or some number equal to whatever the reserve would normally be for operating costs, expenses at the end. So if someone can kind of walk me through that, that would be really appreciated. So not something we do today, but.
Yeah, Anthony, you're saying you can do that. Yeah, so just make sure we're clear what would happen in that scenario. When we put forward the actual budget for that, let's pick a fictitious district that has been collecting funds over multiple years to do those improvements, that money would be budgeted in that district's annual budget to deploy that money for that fiscal year. It wouldn't be spent out of a special fund. It would be just spent out of that, the budget for that district.
What I can imagine, though, is you get to a point where you got 5 years of accumulation to pay for this improvement, but you're kind of negative amounts for the maintenance portion that's left over, right? And you could wind up with a position where at the end, if you wanted to clear everything out, you have to kind of contribute money into it in order to bring it up to zero.
So the process you're describing is actually somewhat covered in 6.3.1. So we're only looking back to June 30th of 2024. So effectively, that column should represent the balance of improvement funds for those districts. Now, if a improvement fund is released or planned to be released within a fiscal year, it effectively means it's being released back into the budget. So, like Director Wolf said, the budget for that fiscal year, that money is released into the budget for a purpose to be used that fiscal year. You are correct in that over the course of however many years an improvement fund is being paid into, the final year of planned deposits, I would suppose you would say, you should potentially see a higher than usual budget for that fiscal year to accommodate both your maintenance expenses and your improvement expenses, your project expenses. Now, for districts that are capped, that just because they're capped doesn't necessarily mean they can't afford both. That is the case in some districts, but not all. Right. So in a fictitious district that can't potentially pay for both maintenance and improvement expenses, what, generally speaking, how staff has treated that is that we have focused on maintenance expenses and we do not save for future projects because they cannot afford to both keep their improvements in a maintained manner and save for the future.
So at the end of 5 years, let's say you have a $145,000 project, but you only have $133,000 to spend on it. At that point, do you do the project anyway?
You can if there is the ability for a district to, there's a lot of moving parts here. So a district doesn't necessarily have to have, so there is no floor for operating reserves. Technically that would be zero, but a district can, if the city allows it, right, to go into a negative fund balance position, or it can also carry a positive fund balance year over year. Okay. If the city council does not loan the district the difference for that project, that specific project, then it is conceivable that it could potentially have a negative fund balance if the actual expenses are fully expended up to the $140,000 number. Okay. But that's entirely hypothetical. But that's effectively how the process should work.
Well, let's take it offline because I don't want people's eyes to glaze over the math here. Even my eyes are starting to glaze over. But let's do that. we'll figure out a date to do that, perhaps. I do struggle, the other thing I struggle with is, which is something that I think is just the reality here, is that when I look at the roughly 2.9 million, I think it is, that is in this one table for maintenance costs. Let me see if I can find that. It looked like roughly maybe 900,000 of it really gets spent, one way or another, based on, for overhead and just the cost of maintaining the district. And I'm just kind of struggling with that, because I'm thinking people should get their money's worth, but it's hard to do that when, let's say, 900,000 out of a $2.9 million figure is just covering the costs of running the operation. But we'll just, I guess we'll deal with that offline, unless you want to address that.
We certainly can cover that when we go over that process. Can I go back, and I apologize, Committee Member Starr, you had mentioned a section in the code that talked about the maintenance. Could you just repeat that section again?
22.531.
22.531?
Yeah, so where they're defining maintenance, maintainer or maintenance means the following. And like I said, it's probably not a problem if improvements and maintenance can be done as projects, but if only improvements can be done as projects, then our whole basis for accumulating these funds is, in my mind, in question. And I apologize, I'm using up so much of our time here for so many items on our agenda.
So we have the consultant. Did you want to say something, sir?
Yeah, did we have that open question with our consultant earlier?
We can write them up.
I was able to research the LMD 37 project for $45,000. It does appear that it was showing as an expense in the maintenance costs for table 6.1, but it wasn't correctly reflected where you had mentioned, Committee Member Chair. It should be showing in that project released column for $45,000 for 25-26. So I'd be happy to update that, and we can get an amended table in there. That will change the balance of that particular reserve installment collection to $12,667 at the end of fiscal year.
I really appreciate that. I do.
Of course,
I do thoroughly read these things.
Yes, it's quite a lot of numbers and balancing, and we do want to make sure, of course, everything's 100% accurate. The total expenditures and ending balance on all the other tables I confirmed is correct. It's just that one was kind of in the wrong place, so we'll get that adjusted and amended.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions, committee members?
I don't have questions this time. I'm probably going to vote no on this recommendation. Sure. I imagine you might vote otherwise, but I'm concerned about just the overall cost of running this program.
Mayor, I really appreciate all the questions and the feedback, because I think it provides the opportunity for the community at large to share any concerns or ask more questions. So thank you, Councilmember Starr. I'd like to move forward with a recommendation from staff, because it also gives us an opportunity as a city council to consider and dig deeper if need. So that's my motion.
Thank you. I can second that motion. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on this particular item before we move to discussion or vote?
Chair MacArthur, we do not have any public speakers for this item. Thank you.
Thank you. You have any further discussion on this item? I think we, okay. Madam Clerk, can we just call for the vote?
Committee Member Starr?
No.
Committee Member Rodriguez?
Aye.
Chair MacArthur?
Yes.
And the motion carries 2-1. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the next item on the agenda. This is item D3 from Public Works, fiscal year 2025-26 resolution to levy assessments in Mandalay Beach Maintenance District. Recommendation that the Finance and Governance Committee recommend that the City Council, acting as the legislative body for the Mandalay Beach Maintenance District, hold a public hearing on June 3rd, 2025 to receive public testimony regarding the proposed fiscal year 2025-26 assessments for the Mandalay Beach Maintenance District and adopt a resolution to levy the special tax assessment for fiscal year 25-26 within the Mandalay Beach Maintenance District for fiscal year 25-26. And Director Wolf is here to answer any questions we may have with staff. At this point, any member of this committee have any questions of staff? No? Go ahead, Councilmember Starr.
Thank you. And this might be a history question, but I'm thinking about regarding the beach maintenance at, and I can never pronounce this correctly, Olokoi Beach Park. How did the city conclude that 60% of this cost should be paid by the people assessed in this district and 40% should be the city's responsibility? I guess when I think of maintenance of a beach, I think of something that just provides a general benefit, not really a special benefit. I mean, anyone can go to the beach. So I'm struggling with where we came to the conclusion that it's only 40% the city's responsibility.
So this district is not it's not formed under the same code as the LMDs like we just discussed. This is a 1911 Act district, and as such, it has a different set of assessment guidelines, assessment processes, things along those lines. This the act in which this district was formed under is, well, that's over 100 years old. Not many cities use these acts anymore to form these districts. I will say historically why the percentage was set as to what it was. That was set via resolution by the city council at the time without a view into that room, and I can't remember exactly which year it was. I can't tell you the exact reason. Sorry. Oh, thank you, 1983 actually. So
1983.
But what I can say is that by setting the essentially the benefit amount for the city to care for at that point, that has been the percentage split that has been adopted ever since and hasn't changed.
So when Prop 218 came around, I think that was 1996. I seem to recall part of it required that within like a year we had to have a vote on existing taxes. And I'm wondering if this was not subject to that, or maybe my memory of the Prop 218 is wrong.
So Prop 218 does specify, it basically, I should say, it delineated rules for quite a few items. And actually, if Mr. Mandel is still on, I'm going to punt this question over to him because he has been examining some of our 1911 Act district languages, and specifically in regard to that particular question as to the difference between an assessment and a tax.
Yeah, I can't speak to this specific district because I haven't been working on it yet. But you are correct, Mr. Councilmember, that Proposition 218 did require that certain assessments be reapproved under the Proposition 218 rules within a year and a half of Proposition 218 being adopted, but it also exempted a whole swath of districts from those requirements and essentially grandfathered in the existing assessments. So with respect to those grandfathered assessment districts, the general rule is you can keep assessing at the rates that were approved prior to Prop 218 and using the benefit findings, which were not necessarily Prop 218 compliant, that were used prior to Prop 218. But you're only grandfathered as long as the rates don't exceed what they were in the year before Proposition 218 was adopted.
Right, so if this was actually introduced today, if we wanted to impose this assessment for the first time, it would require a 218 vote, right?
Correct. Yeah, this is a kind of an oddity that only occurs with respect to pre-existing assessments, which existed at the point where 218 got adopted, and 218 grandfathered the bulk of those districts and essentially said you can keep doing what you've been doing as long as you don't increase the rates.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Councilwoman Rodriguez, any questions? No. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers on this particular item?
Chair MacArthur, we do not have any public speakers for this item in person or virtually.
Thank you. What's the desire of the committee on this item? Can I get a motion?
It's a hearing, and I just want to give the opportunity
To
for
push it,
folks,
yeah.
but I recognize, I think a lot of the trends in some of these issues are, do we tax, do we not tax, and what impact does that have on our community? So I move the recommended action, and I respectfully appreciate your feedback.
I think we got a first and a second. Madam Clerk, call the vote to move this public hearing item.
Chair MacArthur, just for the record, who was the second on this?
No, he's against it.
I'm the second.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
You could second and then
Yes,
just vote no.
yes.
Seconded and vote
Or you
against
can let it
That's-
die.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Chair MacArthur,
Yes.
Committee Member Rodriguez,
Aye.
and Committee Member Starr.
No, respectfully.
Okay, that motion carries 2-1. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to item D4. This is from Public Works. Subject entails the modification of the City of Oxnard Community Facilities District Number 9. This is North Shore and Mandalay Bay, and approval of the deposit and reimbursement agreement and the special tax disbursement agreement, A 8588. The recommendations of the Finance and Governance Committee recommend that the City Council, acting as the legislative body of the City of Oxnard Community Facilities District Number 9, adopt the following resolution. A resolution approving the deposit and reimbursement agreement and a special tax disbursement agreement relating to the change proceedings for the City of Oxnard Community Facilities District Number 9. 2, a resolution of consideration declaring its intention to modify the rate and method of apportionment of the special tax relating to the City of Oxnard Community Facilities District. 9, increase certain special tax rates, add a new special tax, increase the maximum bonded indebtedness, amend a funding and acquisition agreement, and revise the appropriations limit of said Community Facilities District and other related actions in connection thereto. And Director Wolf is here. Any committee members have any questions of staff on this particular item? Yes.
Well, I think my only question would be from the presentation, what would be the impact of not approving this special tax?
So I will actually call up some representatives from the developer here. Actually, I'm to help answer some of these questions. In general, and I'll take the first part of this in case anybody wants to chime in on the developer team. But the first part of this, making these changes and this is, I'm going to be painting with very broad strokes here. One of the first things that I would say would come to mind is that the improvement costs that were originally estimated under this particular CFD to be covered and reimbursed are potentially very much below what the actual construction costs of these improvements will be. So there is that component here, and that is, I would say, one of the primary drivers for why this was brought forward, is to also adjust the calculations by which they were made under valuations for the homes that are planned to be built here were much lower than what the actual expected prices would be. So the overall capacity for both costs and also revenues within this particular district are, under the original form, or the current formation documents, excuse me, are much lower than what the actual anticipated expenses and potential revenues could be under the updated residential expenses and sale prices, excuse me. Don't know if I covered all that. Okay.
Any other questions? Anything?
Please, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I guess first, I really just want to understand the process here. So when I look at page 136 of our staff report, it talks about the second step at the City Council meeting on June 26, 2025. And the part that says the City Council acting as the legislative body is CFD 9, you have an A, and then B, provided there's no majority protest, adopts a resolution calling for election. Majority protest by whom?
Majority protest by qualified voters, or I should actually be property owners, excuse me.
So just the property owners in this case. Okay. All right. All right, well, I definitely have my opinions on this, but I'll let people ask their questions if they want to ask their questions.
Are there any public speakers on this item before we move to discussion, Madam Clerk?
Chair MacArthur and committee members, no, there is no request to speak in person or virtually for this item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah,
So I'll comment. So just philosophically speaking, I really have trouble with increasing a tax that was not imposed by the electorate on itself. And I really have a problem with us creating a bonded indebtedness that is put in by other than the electorate. I understand why the developer may want to do that. I can see how it would help with him with financing certain projects that he wants to do as opposed to going into alternative means. But just philosophically, I just cannot really vote for something that will increase a tax unless the electorate has the ability to, unless the electorate has the ability to approve it in advance. So that's my position, and I respect that others will probably have a different opinion than mine.
Thank you, Councilmember Starr. Any comments, anything, or do you have a motion to?
Well, again, I think the theme of many of these items is that folks will have the opportunity to come and share any of their concerns, because I want to hear it all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I'm not taking this lightly in terms of like taxing people. Like it's not for kicks, I promise that much.
Yeah.
Oh, do you want to move?
Yeah,
You can, well, I'll move the recommended action from staff, and I look forward to hearing from constituents, because this will be coming up to the entire council.
thank you. I'll second that motion. Madam Clerk, can we get the vote?
Committee Member Rodriguez,
Aye.
Committee Member Starr,
No.
and Chair MacArthur.
Yes,
And the motion carries 2-1. Thank you.
thank you. We'll go to item D5 from the Housing Department. Subject Housing Authority, low rent, a public housing and housing choice voucher program, Section 8, budgets for fiscal year 25-26. Recommendation that the Finance and Governance Committee recommend that the Board of Commissioners of the Housing Authority of the City of Oxnard, 1, adopt a resolution approving the recommended $7,795,322 operating budgets for the low-rent public housing program for fiscal year 25-26, as presented for each project area, and approve and authorize the use of $201,272 of unrestricted cash to fund the projected deficit. And 2, adopt a resolution approving the recommended $35,921,457 operating budget for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, Section 8 for fiscal year 25-26, and approve the authorize the use of $149,715 of unrestricted cash to fund the projected deficit. And Interim Director Brenda Lopez is here to answer any questions we may have of her. Do any council members have any questions of Ms. Lopez? We'll go with Councilmember Starr, of course. Go ahead.
Thank you. So starting on page 228 of our staff report, yes, I see we have budgets there. I'm looking at the column headings, which are numbers 311 through 318, and I assume that those must be fund numbers, but I'm not sure. And if they are fund numbers, I certainly couldn't discern which fund is which, because there's no legend that says 311 means this or 312 means that. So I'm wondering if you can help clarify that for me.
Yes, thank you. I'm Brenda Lopez, Interim Housing Director. The ledger, which is talking about 31-1, 31-2, 31-3, and so forth, each of them refers to the project number assigned to a property. So for example, 31-1 is the Colonia vacant lot, 31-2 is Felicia Court, 31-3 is Colonia Road, 31-4 is Pleasant Valley, 31 Plaza Vista. So each site has what they call an app number assigned by HUD, and because this needs to be submitted to HUD, we have to designate it with those numbers.
Okay, so I guess my request to you is that when this comes before the full council, if you can put some addition into your report that just basically defines what the 311 through 318 is, so that way it'll be clear to them when they see that. I do have another question, Mr. Mayor. So I see that there's a management fee that's calculated. Let's see, where is that? I see, so a management fee income of $799,610, and I was wondering, how is that calculated? It's in the other income section on page 228, that second line there, management fee. Where's that $799,610? How is that number derived?
So the management fee the asset management fee, and the booking fee that you see. All three of them are right next to each other. All of those estimates are calculated by HUD. So Department of Housing and Urban Development has a predetermined subsidy they award us per unit. So roughly, the management fee runs at about $108. The asset management fee runs at about $10 per unit if the unit is occupied, and then bookkeeping around $7.50 per unit, regardless of occupancy. So again, HUD determines that every year, and they basically say how much they're going to fine you for.
So you have that column, it's the COCC column, I forget what COCC stood for, but I think it's some sort of centralized management piece, right?
Yeah, so the centralized office cost center, or COCC, think of it as an administrative account where all of the admin revenue comes in that cannot be directly allocated to a specific property.
Right. So when I look at for example, that management fee income, it's basically, if it's income for this overall cost center, then it's also an expense at the same time for the various properties. Is that right?
Correct.
So that's what I thought too. And then I looked at the very next page on 229. So note the 799,610 of income. I would expect to see the exact same amount for expense. But if I look on the next page, if I can move to the next page, what I see is $666,775 for the management fee expense under other admin expenses, if you see that. And I'm wondering, is someone else paying the $133,000 difference, or is there just an issue with how the budget is prepared, or?
No, so any expenses that cannot be very specifically titled, I'll give a good example. I work at 318, which is the Plaza Vista building. I can directly allocate my expense to that property.
Right.
You can charge it against that property. But for example, if I manage the employee at that property, only a portion of my expense can be attributed to that property. So it won't match exactly. Why? Because anything that cannot be directly tied to the property then gets allocated under the COCC expense. So part of the expense is absorbed by the properties. Does that mean?
So part of it, but there's, I guess, a piece that's not, is what you're saying?
Correct, because anything that cannot be very directly tied, HUD doesn't allow us to charge it against it. So it goes in the COCC account.
So you have the COCC account, you're receiving, I guess, from the properties, in a sense, $666,775, and somehow from HUD, you're getting an additional $135,000, is that what you're saying?
No, so sorry. Can you repeat the question again?
So when I look at the management fee expenses for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different properties here, I see that all adds up to $666,775 of expense, which my assumption is that management fee all gets paid to the COCC. But the COCC revenue is more than $666,775. It is at $799,610. And I'm just trying to understand where does that extra $133,000 come from?
Got it. Okay, so you're asking the additional revenue reflected in the COCC account that doesn't match the specific projects.
Specifically for management fees, yes.
So the COCC account also includes non-public housing properties. Okay. So for those, the revenue that comes in for fee for service, which means, for example, management that we charge those properties, they would come into this COCC account. So there is other little bit of revenue that comes from non-public housing properties.
So these are revenues that wouldn't be part of these budgets that we have to keep track of for HUD.
Correct.
Okay, that answers my questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Lopez, for that clarification. I knew what the numbers were, by the way, having worked at the Housing Authority for some time, so I knew exactly what 311 to the disadvantage of council members, so I knew what those numbers were.
And I'll make sure we add the description for the city council.
Yeah. Councilwoman
I'm with
Rodriguez?
Councilmember Starr. I thought they were just codes for different buckets of funding, but that makes a lot more sense. Thank you for asking the question. No, I think my only, when I read this and did my homework for today's meeting, I was just thinking like the looming budget cuts potentially, but I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. That's not something. So should we receive cuts in that funding source, would you be coming back to council and asking for subsidies like this?
It could be.
Or it could be one of the options?
Yeah, it just depends. Obviously, each program has some reserves. And also, we are working with HUD already in preparation to limit our costs. So there are already efforts underway, kind of preparing, but it's not possible to tell the impact at this time.
Yeah, I understand. And I did share some of that information at the last city council meeting. But I think that was my only concern or flag to bring to this table, but thank you very much.
Yeah,
Would
thank
you
you,
like to make
Councilwoman Rodriguez.
a
Yeah,
motion?
Sure, I'll make the motion, move the recommended action.
I will second that motion.
Wonderful. We agree on something. Madam Clerk, are there any speakers on this item?
Chair MacArthur and committee members, we do not have any speakers in person or virtually for this item.
Thank you so much. Can we get the vote?
Committee Member Starr,
Yes.
Committee Member Rodriguez,
Aye.
Chair MacArthur,
Yes,
and the motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. We'll move to item D6 from the Finance Department. Agreement for the annual financial audits and single audits for federally funded programs for fiscal years 24-25 through 28-29. The recommendation is that the Finance and Governance Committee recommend that the City Council approve and authorize the mayor to execute a 5-year agreement with Macias, Genie, and O'Connell LLP in the amount of $1,219,895 for annual financial audits and single audits for federally funded programs. Staff is here to answer questions we may have of them. Council members, Councilwoman, any questions? We'll go to Council Member Starr. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Just a question on the report. So I want to make sure I understand how this works. So in one part it says, with the outreach effort, the RFP received 45 single views within the online platform, and 6 firms ultimately submitted proposals to the RFP. Can you just tell me more about what do you mean by the 45 single views? Is there, which online platform, and what are you measuring, and can you tell who's actually viewing? Do we have that type of insight?
Good evening, Javier Chagoya Lázaro, Chief Financial Officer with the City of Oxnard. That makes reference to the online tool that we use to make the proposal available for different companies to look and see if, and review the proposal for them to choose and decide if they want to submit a proposal. So we have access for every proposal. We get a report that basically show how many instances that request has been reviewed by someone. So you have the name of the entity and an email address. So when we review all those, we saw there was a total of 45 unique checks for the proposal. For those 45 unique requests, there were 26 accounting firms, and for those 26 accounting firms, the city received 6 proposals.
So you were actually able to see which 26 firms those were? That's really a nice feature. So that way, if someone looks into it, you could always call up and say, hey, why don't you submit a bid or proposal?
Well, we only do that when we don't receive proposals, or we receive only one. Okay. In this case, we have received 6 proposals. All of them were valid, and we just proceed to evaluate those proposals.
Okay. So one thing that I would have liked to have seen is actually something that was provided when this report was made several years ago for this existing, the incumbent auditor. Back then, the report included a comparison of what the other competing firm was offering. And I'm not saying that you make a determination based just on price, but as a council member, it's kind of nice to know, well, this is kind of the range of prices that we received for these proposals. It's okay if you don't pick the bottom one, but it's just kind of get a perspective, if you know what I'm saying. One thing I did like about this report is that there was a comparison with what we actually did spend on in the prior 5 years, and that gave me some comfort that the price that we're paying is not out of line based on history, and probably in real terms it's actually gone down a little bit because of inflation. So in that sense, I'm pretty happy about it. But what would really make me happier, and maybe this is something that can be provided between now and the council meeting when we consider this, is I'd love to see what the proposals were that we did receive. So I can compare them too, because I have a little bit of background in accounting, as you can imagine.
Just real quick, City Attorney, is that something that we can do, is include the estimated,
Hi,
the proposals they made? Yeah.
Elle McCarran. No, we typically don't share the proposals that are submitted in response to our RFP. And the reason why is because these are negotiated on the best value basis where price is not the ultimate factor. And so we don't release them until, or they're not allowed to be released. And even under the Public Records Act laws, they're not allowed to be released until it's awarded, because that jeopardizes our ability to negotiate if you guys don't approve the award that's recommended by staff, or it gives the other proposers the chance to scrutinize the proposals, go through and just start protesting like crazy and throwing out the whole process. So we do keep them secret until award, and then if somebody submits a request through the PRA portal, they will get certain documents.
So even the one proposal that we got that we look favorably upon, that we want to accept, we're prohibited from being able to look at that before making a decision?
For right now, yes, we don't make them public. If it's something that you would like a little more information on, we can definitely discuss that offline.
Sure. It does make it kind of tough for someone in my shoes to go, oh, I see that this is the obvious choice. I'm not questioning the process that went through, or even the determination. I'm very happy to see this firm rather than the previous firm for a number of reasons, which some of you may know about why. I was happy to read I think I was looking in a 2023 article that this particular firm has revenues in excess of $134 million a year, good-sized firm. The office is in 14 states, and they have over 600 employees. I really like that because the previous firm we had was very small, and my concern with it was that we were such a large client relative to them that I thought it jeopardized their ability to remain independent. I have no question about this firm being able to remain independent, given that we're such a small, tiny part of their revenues that they could tell us to take a long walk on a short pier if we had a disagreement. One other question.
Sure, go ahead.
In the previous, with the previous auditor, they were charging us for various expenses, and I think some of those were really, really, really questionable. I won't get into the details here now. I might provide it later at a council meeting. But I just want some assurance here that, at least the way I read this agreement, that I think the compensation is limited just to the hourly rates, that there isn't really an opportunity for them to charge us costs. Is that true, or did I read it wrong?
Well, the price that they quoted is a not to exceed value. So there is an hourly rate, but there's a not to exceed amount on an annual basis and over the 5-year basis as well.
So they can charge us for, in addition to hours, they can charge us for various, what they would call reimbursable expenses, as long as they don't exceed the overall cap. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, it has to be within the scope of services that they agree with us, and that's going to be where the price is at. Okay. So if there's additional scope that we're requiring of them, there might be further discussions to do an amendment in that case, but there's a whole lieu of scope of services that's very detailed and laid out.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a change in scope. I'm talking about, here's what I'd like to see in the future. What I'd like to see is whenever the city is billed for expenses, I want to make sure that they're providing you with receipts to back that up. We've had an issue here where in the past, we've simply just accepted the amounts. And the reason why I know that is because in litigation, doing discovery, I found out that there was no backup to the receipts. There was no backup receipts to the extra expenses they were charging us. And I also found out through litigation, when we were trying to question the auditor as far as their activities, looking at their reimbursed expenses, the expenses they were charging for were outrageous. We're talking about gym memberships, auto repairs, really, really fancy dinners. At least that's what the auditing firm provided us in discovery. So that disturbs me, and my hope is that when we go forward with this, that when we do pay for these sorts of expenses on this new auditor, that we always ask for backup and that we question if it's not reasonable. So, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the work that was done on this and finding this agency that has shown to you that they've got the technical capabilities to do the work for a city our size, to get somebody of their caliber and their expertise. Certainly shows the diligence and the purposefulness of your intentions to get a good firm to come out here. So thank you for that effort. I'm prepared to move the item forward as recommended.
I will second the item as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers on this item, Madam Clerk?
Chair MacArthur and committee members, there are no speakers for this item in person or virtually. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair MacArthur?
Yes.
Committee member Starr?
Yes.
Committee member Rodriguez?
Aye.
And the motion carries 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And unless there's an item for future agenda, I don't know if there is, and if there's no further business on the agenda and without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.